If you erased every ounce of pain from your life, would you finally be free? Or would you flatten your soul into a two-dimensional picture that never learns to stand? I'm going to make a claim and then prove it with philosophy you can test tonight. Without friction, character withers, and without character, no success, even spiritual success, can endure. Stay with me to the end, because I'll give you a simple, repeatable practice that turns the hardest parts of your day into fuel, and we'll close an open loop we're about to create. The quiet gate you must pass before anything like wisdom lets you through. Before we begin, a brief word in good faith. What follows is education, not therapy or personal advice. We'll talk about death, meaning, and interior freedom with calm precision. When we touch stories drawn from modern psychology or private reports of unusual experience, we will not pretend certainty where none exists. The ancient Stoics did not build a doctrine on unverifiable claims. They built a way of life on what could be practiced. In that spirit, I will treat powerful accounts, whether near-death visions or moments of overwhelming clarity, as the raw material of reflection, not as proof of an afterlife. Our aim is simple: to live so well before the end that whatever comes after, we have nothing to fear. A letter surfaces after decades of dust. In it, a great mind describes a rupture, consciousness unmoored from the body, a vision of the world not as a neighborhood, but as a luminous marble suspended in black silk, a feeling of being taught without words, a threshold guarded not by monsters, but by meaning. The claim is not that dogma is true. The claim is that something like the soul carries weight, and weight requires contrast. Where there is only light, there is no relief. Where there is no shadow, there is no depth. Whether you take that letter as memory, symbol, or imagination, the Stoic hears a useful signal through the static. A life without adversity is a life without purchase. The wheel of the mind spins, but nothing moves. This is where popular talk about Stoicism veers into a ditch. People imagine a hard shell, a frozen warrior, a person who feels nothing. But the old texts speak with warmer blood. Marcus Aurelius, a working emperor, writes to himself at dawn, reminding his future self that he will meet the jealous, the irritable, the ill-informed, and that none of them can harm his mind unless he hands them the key. Epictetus, a freed slave-turned-teacher, calls the human ruling faculty a citadel. It does not refuse feeling, it refuses needless captivity. Seneca, the dramatist statesman, insists that fortune tests us not to disprove our dignity, but to reveal it. In plain language, your judgments, not the jolts of the world, determine the character of your experience. Shadow is not an enemy to be annihilated. It is the relief that allows the figure to take shape. Why does this matter now? Because more and more of us live in rooms so illuminated by feeds and alerts that we mistake exposure for understanding. We curate glare and call it truth. We flatten grief into a scrollable moment and call it processed. If you have felt lately that your days look bright and feel thin, you are touching the problem with your own hands. The promise of a world without pain has a hidden price tag, a self without mass. Ancient philosophy will not sell you a painless life. It will give you a spine. Let's start where the modern letter points, the image of a temple of light, where everything superficial burns off and something truer remains. The Stoic does not need the otherworldly to accept the lesson. We can experience this purification now, if we are honest. Think of the last time you lost something you could not control. A job, a relationship, a reputation someone decided for you. For a week, your mind threw sparks. Then, after the flare, came a quiet interior audit. What part of me was real? What part was costume? The practice at the core of Stoicism is this audit, done voluntarily and daily. The Greeks called the faculty that conducts it proheresis, the power of choice, the inner hand that can open or close. Everything else, health, wealth, praise, market weather, the body's fate, is material for practice, not evil, not good, simply raw timber. You can plane it into virtue, or you can let it rot in the yard. The letter speaks of presences at a threshold, gatekeepers who do not hate, but who deny passage until a person becomes who they are meant to be. Strip the mythology, keep the demand. Are you living as you say you believe, or are your maxims decorative? Stoicism calls this the unity of doctrine and life. The words are not a costume, they are a contract. Break it, and the gate does not open. Keep it, and even if storms shove you into unfamiliar coasts, you know how to build shelter because your hands have built before. Let me show you what happens when the contrast goes missing. Years ago, I watched a man I'll call Adrian build a company with unusual speed. He was clever, generous in public, and terrified of silence. Any moment of difficulty was paved over with more light, more updates, more applause, more pivots that hid the one hard decision he would not make. Warnings piled up in his inbox like winter mail. He opened the good news first. He started sleeping under fluorescent optimism and mistook glare for day. When the downturn came, it did not merely wound his balance sheet. It exposed a muscle he had not trained. He collapsed inward. The downfall was preventable, not because the market owed him mercy, but because he had abandoned the habit of sitting with shadow. A regular practice of negative visualization, the Stoic rehearsal of setbacks before they arrive, would have placed weight in the right places. He would have held cash longer. He would have confronted a failing product earlier. He would have looked at his own cravings without flinching and told them to wait outside while he made adult decisions. The virtue here is not cynicism. It is the discipline of anticipation. The ship that drills in calm waters is not paranoid. It is merciful to the crew. Now, a different story. A delayed awakening that hurt before it healed. A young surgeon I'll call Mira lost her father and went back to work 3 days later, proud of her focus and secretly afraid of the quiet. For months, she executed flawlessly, and for months, she avoided every corridor in her mind where grief waited. Then, anxiety started to ambush her in small humiliations. The hand that shook during a minor procedure she'd done 100 times. The sudden desire to cancel on friends she loved because laughter felt like betrayal. She came to philosophy not for doctrine, but for a map. The Stoic map does not outlaw tears. It refuses their tyranny. Memento mori, remember death, is not a threat. It is a lens. She began a simple evening review, Marcus style. What impressions took me today, and what did I consent to? Where did I act from fear of feeling, and where did I allow the feeling to move through while I acted from choice? The first week, she found only smoke. By the second month, she could name the shape of grief without apology. Paradoxically, her hand steadied. The shadow did not vanish. It finally had weight, and weight produced balance. And then there is the long, quiet transformation that actually works because it refuses spectacle. Call him Kien. He was a high school teacher with a brother in his care, nonverbal, prone to storms of noise, and a schedule that tested every nerve. His first instinct was war. Fight the chaos, conquer the day, master every variable. He failed before sunrise. Something changed when he stopped calling the interruptions enemies and started classifying them by the Stoic dichotomy. Up to me, not up to me. The tone of a stranger in the grocery store aisle when his brother rocked and hummed, not up to me. The readiness of the bag he kept by the door, noise-canceling headphones, the familiar scarf, a laminated card that explained kindly what onlookers were seeing. Up to me. The world began to feel less like a hailstorm and more like weather, sometimes punishing, never personal. He developed a morning sentence that acted like a keel. Today, I am the kind of man who makes things easier for the people he loves. At night, his journal was 2 lines only. One moment of unnecessary resistance he could release tomorrow, one moment of patient presence he wanted to repeat. He did not become a saint, he became reliable. This is the axis of Stoic training: impression, ascent, action, review. There is nothing supernatural in the sequence, and yet its fruits feel like grace. You notice a stimulus for what it is, a picture presented to the mind, often loud, often poorly captioned. You decide whether to grant it assent, agreement that this picture deserves the key to your mood. You act according to your role and the virtue appropriate to the moment: justice, courage, temperance, practical wisdom. Then, when the day closes, you review without cruelty, the way a craftsman looks at tomorrow's workbench. Each cycle thickens the grain of character. Each cycle gives depth. Here, the old and new can hold hands without superstition. The letter's image of a world with light but no shadow warns that the abolition of pain would abolish texture. The Stoic says, do not pursue pain, but do not waste it. Seneca compares the wise soul to a fire that turns what it consumes into strength. That is not a call to martyrdom. It is a recognition that the furnace is already lit. Your choice is whether to feed it scraps of outrage and self-pity that produce smoke, or to feed it disciplined attention that produces heat you can use. When you try to live without any shadow, you end up living without any relief. You cannot model a sculpture out of sunlight. Where then does death fit? The ancients would tell you to keep it in view as a proportioning tool. Death is not the end of meaning. Death is the measure that helps you cut your day to size. Marcus writes, do not act as if you were going to live 10,000 years. But he does not follow with a frantic productivity rant. He follows with a tenderness for the present task. If you knew the meeting you complain about contained the last woman you will ever get to encourage in precisely this way, would you speak with precision or with laziness? If you knew this evening routine might be among your last 100, would you scroll it away or walk it with your daughter into the kitchen and teach her a recipe she will one day make without you? The practice is not morbid. It is clarifying. It colors your minutes so they do not all feel the same. Because the ancient sources are so often misquoted in self-help bullet points, let's place the pillars carefully. Epictetus distinguishes things that are up to us: our judgments, intentions, desires, aversions, and the movement of our will from things not up to us, our body's health, reputation, outcomes of actions, and most external events. He does not claim that our feelings are always choices. He claims that our consent to the stories we tell about those feelings is where freedom begins. Marcus emphasizes sympathia, our interconnection with the whole, and asks us to act not as isolated heroes, but as organs in a single body. Seneca draws the line between fortune's gifts and the handful of goods that are truly ours: wisdom in choice, justice in action, courage under pressure, temperance in appetite. All this is clean and minimalist. Modern retellings sometimes add a layer of metaphysical certainty the ancient texts do not require. You do not need to resolve what happens after the heart stops to resolve how you will speak to your child after school today. That is the Stoics' wager. Live as if virtue is the aim, and the rest will sort itself out. There is a phrase in the letter about a space between worlds. You do not have to leave your body to walk there. The space between worlds is the pause between stimulus and response. It is the breath you take before you answer the provocative email, the half second in which you decide whether the story you're about to tell yourself will help or harm. You can train that space like a muscle. At first it shivers, then it holds. One day it holds long enough for you to recognize an old pattern and change it mid-flight. This is not dramatic, it is temple work. When people hear that Stoicism embraces shadow, they worry it welcomes suffering. That's a poor translation. The art is to approach necessary pain with posture and to reduce unnecessary pain by removing false beliefs. If your back hurts, see a doctor. Strengthen your core. Rearrange your chair. If your heart hurts because your pride cannot accept that a stranger misunderstood you on the internet, turn off the spigot that feeds the injury and step outside. If your heart hurts because you betrayed a promise, do not anesthetize it. Repair what you can and carry the clean weight of remorse until it has taught you enough to make future lighter. The discipline is not masochism. It is accuracy. Accuracy turns out to be surprisingly gentle. When you greet the morning, admit the weather inside before you quote the Stoics to yourself. If you are brittle, name it. If you are full of charge, aim it. If you are empty, do something small for someone who will never know your name. Then carry on with the simplest plan. Perform the duties near to hand. You are not responsible for the grand choreography of history. You are responsible for the inch in front of your nose. Do not confuse cosmic theater with human assignments. As Epictetus says, you are an actor in a play the length of which is not up to you. Play your role well. If you are the gardener today, cultivate. If you are the advocate today, speak. If you are the son or the daughter today, listen. Architecture offers a useful picture. A city square looks impressive because someone dug below street level to pour a foundation that no tourist photographs. Roots are not pretty. Foundations do not go viral. But the height of the column depends on the depth of what you cannot see. The letter's imagery of roots sunk in darkness and a crown ablaze is not a riddle. It is engineering. If you remove all darkness from a building plan, you remove basements and footings. The first gust asks hard questions. The Stoic takes quiet time, the unposted hour in the morning and the unposted audit at night, and treats them as the substructure on which the visible life depends. Eliminate that shadow time, and you will have to pretend strength you do not possess. Sailing offers another. You cannot command the wind, only the trim of your sails and the angle of your keel. A helmsman who curses weather exhausts his crew. A helmsman who reads weather uses it. The same storm that drowns the sloppy teaches the attentive the shape of their craft. You will not always dodge the reef. You can learn to make your hull forgive your errors. The map here is virtue again. Prudence sets your angle. Courage holds it in chop. Temperance keeps your appetite for speed from snapping your mast. And justice remembers you do not sail alone. If you want a mystical word for that, call it grace. If you want a practical word, call it skill. Both are more faithful than luck. So, what do you gain by staying until the end? A testable method and the closing of our loop. The method is easy to learn and hard to skip once you feel its leverage. Tonight, take 3 minutes and keep a small shadow ledger. Write one moment from your day where you dodged necessary friction. Perhaps you smiled and said yes when no was required. Or you swiped away a feeling that needed a name. Then write one small deliberate discomfort you will embrace tomorrow that aims at a virtue you actually care about. Make it laughably modest. Begin the awkward conversation. Take the stairs when you want the elevator. Set your phone in another room for the first hour of work. Apologize with specificity rather than strategy. In the morning, do it. At night, review what happened with craftsmanship, not condemnation. You are not a judge pronouncing sentence. You are an artisan inspecting a surface for where to sand next. Repeat this for a week, then notice. You will start to like rooms with honest air and the open loop, the quiet gate. It is not guarded by mythic beings who demand passwords. It is guarded by the mismatch between the standard you recite and the life you live. The key is not knowledge. It is growth. If you want to pass, you must carry the weight of your own words. This is why the letter's insight about shadow matters. A world with only light seduces us into announcing what we never practice. A life with honored shadow trains us to under-announce and over-deliver. The gate recognizes that posture. It opens for those who have practiced in secret what they would be proud to reveal. You may be wondering where to place all this when modern interpretations of Stoicism sometimes collide with spiritual claims, whether ancient or contemporary. Place them like this. The Stoic accepts uncertainty about metaphysical furniture and refuses to waste today's moral opportunity waiting for tomorrow's ontological proof. If consciousness extends beyond the body, then a life of virtue makes you durable there. If consciousness ends with the body, a life of virtue makes you luminous here. Either way, you win. Either way, those you love receive a calmer companion. Either way, you stop bargaining with reality and start collaborating with it. The final test is not whether you can speak beautifully about pain, but whether you can look a Tuesday in the face and turn it into practice. That is the city where philosophy lives, not on the mountain, but in the market, the clinic, the classroom, the kitchen. What would happen if, for the next month, you treated your role as sacred and your preferences as negotiable? What could you build if you gave your shadow honest work? What would break that deserves to break? What would endure that has been waiting to endure? I promised a payoff you could use without delay. Here it is in one breath. In the morning, mark one act of voluntary hardship aligned with a virtue, something precise, kind, and a little difficult. During the day, treat every impression as a visitor, not a landlord. In the evening, review without cruelty and make tomorrow 1 inch wiser. This loop, repeated, grows roots in night and light in day. You will not need anyone's letter to convince you that your soul has weight. You will feel it when you speak and see it when you keep a promise that costs you. When you stand one day at whatever threshold the future holds, whether it is a hospital room's humming quiet or a peaceful porch with the sun in your lap, you will recognize the gate. You will not argue with it. You will not explain yourself at length. You will simply be the kind of person who does not need many words. If you are asked, even silently, "Who are you beneath the noise?" your answer will not be a theory. It will be the form your life has taken. If the idea of training with shadow sets you at ease rather than on edge, there is a natural next chapter. We can walk together through negative visualization and voluntary discomfort. The two exercises that turn philosophy from reading into architecture. If you want to know how to rehearse loss without breaking, how to fast from approval without becoming cold, how to practice poverty without romanticizing it, come with me to the next conversation. Bring your ledger. Bring your roll. Bring your ordinary Tuesday. We have foundations to pour in the quiet and a city of days to build in the light.